often talk about the importance of every conversation, every situation of significance, right, on topics that matter, trying to use it as an opportunity to learn, right, rather than validate your views, argue, yell, demand somebody think the way you do. View it as an opportunity to learn. Don't be afraid of that. The fear is it's weak, right? It's indecisive. You need to take a stand. You need to have views. You need to believe in what you believe in. You could still do that, but learn first, right? Get all the input, or at least as much input as you can. So, take every opportunity you can to just learn from situations, particularly those where it might not be as obvious that you can learn from it. So I want to talk about one example of that today, and it's with other people. It's actually a situation that a friend of mine told me about, and it made me think broader, right? More like at a thematic level. And it's important to say though, when I talk about situations like this and I talk about other people's thinking and, maybe where they're missing an opportunity to learn, I don't mean to do that claiming that I have it right and like I'm the expert on it. As I've said in the past, oftentimes for me, as for most people I would imagine, it's easier to see it in other people, right? That's natural. You see other people's flaws, it's easy to, look from the outside and see those opportunities or those mistakes. It's critical that you use that to learn, but then bring it inward, which is what I always try and do. If I see somebody else doing something where I'm like, hey, I don't think they're thinking rationally, or I don't think they're using this as an opportunity to learn, I'll assess that, I'll see what's going on, and then I'll quickly try and bring it back to me and see like, hey, am I doing that? Where might I be doing that same thing? Can I use that to improve how I think? So I just want to say that, kind of caveat a little bit, because I don't want it to seem like I'm preaching or telling people, do it the way I do it, or, I have it all right or figured out. So the situation though, it relates to kind of the race relations topic that I've been talking about the last week or so. And I had a friend, actually a black friend, who reached out and, we talk often, and he asked me a question about, how I am feeling about the current environment, and if I feel like I need to be extra sensitive towards black people, particularly in the workplace. And he told me a story about his wife, who's white, who was, had a situation with one of her employees who's black, where she wasn't doing the job, I think maybe either missed the meeting or was late to work and just wasn't responding to emails for a period of time. And his wife, as the manager, was a little cautious and needed to reach out to somebody. I think it might have been somebody in HR to say like, hey, how do I handle this? Given this as a black woman and with everything going on, I want to be sensitive to it. I want to handle it the right way. And his question was, what do you think about that? Like, and he was being genuine, right? Like, does that bother you? Do you feel like you need to walk on eggshells when interacting with black people now? And kind of acknowledging and understanding. And he talked to some other people, and there was a little bit of anger around it that he sensed from some white people of like, hey, this is kind of ridiculous. Like, I'm all for supporting the cause and all that, but it's I have to walk on eggshells. I have to be so sensitive about what I say and what I do. And like, I don't mean it in any way to be racist or anything like that. Obviously, it's how I would treat any employee if they didn't show up for work or if they missed a meeting. But now I need to adjust the way I'm acting in this situation, and that doesn't seem right. And my first reaction, like the visceral one, was probably, okay, I get that sentiment, I get that principle, because all else equal, that's probably true, right? You shouldn't have to change the way you act. But as I say, I think all of these opportunities are learning opportunities. And this made me think in general about the current kind of situation and dynamics that are at play. It's probably a really interesting opportunity for both white people as well as black people, people of color, to get a little bit of a window into what it's like to be the other side. A little bit, right? I'm not trying to claim it's total, but what I mean by that is, from a white person perspective, look at this situation. So you have a white woman who's at work, who's looking to do her job, has an employee who does something wrong and wants to correct it. But now, because of race, right, and some race comes into play, and now this white woman needs to change, right? She needs to account for that. She needs to adjust her behavior. She needs to act differently. The situation, the dynamics, right, require her to think and act differently because race is involved. Well, if you think about it, you could say that's a really interesting opportunity for that white woman to learn a little bit about what it could be like to be a black person. Because for black people, right, I assume in conversations I've had, that's kind of an everyday occurrence, right? All else equal, race shouldn't come into play in, correcting an employee that does something wrong. But in this case, it did, and you have to account for it. Same for black people often, right? Race shouldn't come into play. They shouldn't have to adjust the way they think or the way they act or the way they react when they get pulled over by a cop or if they, are at a job interview, whatever it is. But oftentimes they feel like they have to because race is always kind of hanging there, and it results in them unfairly having to change their behavior in some way, change the way they think, because race is making that happen. So again, a really interesting opportunity for white people to be in that position. And you could take it and just say, hey, this is bullshit and I'm angry and that makes me mad. Or you could take it to try and learn and say, this is really frustrating. Like this is difficult. And this is only a small glimmer of it, right? Imagine what it's like when it happens all the time and it's out of my control and all those types of things. It's a really interesting dynamic shift to learn from that. On the flip side, right, you could take from a black person, people of color perspective, it's an interesting situation because there's a slight shift, if you will, in kind of the power dynamic or the dynamic of the relationship where, at least for the last few weeks, you could argue black people of color are in a position where, I'll pick my words lightly, but hopefully you'll understand what I mean. Like they've gained a little bit of power, for lack of a better word. I'm not trying to suggest that now the whole racism power dynamic has shifted in any way, but take the situation at this job that my friend was talking about. This woman who missed the meeting, who happened to be black, rather than just getting scolded or in trouble or whatever, some sort of punishment because of it, she was protected, if you will, somewhat because of her race. She had a little bit more power there, if you will, because of her race. And, not to say all black people are taking advantage of that, but, to the extent that it can or does happen, even if you don't intend it to, it's an interesting window into white people perspective, right? Again, just a window into it. But, you have this person who perhaps is able to take advantage of a situation somewhat, because of the color of their skin. And again, not because they even necessarily mean to, they might not even thought about it, but it just kind of works out that way. And it gives a little glimmer into, from a white person perspective, certainly there are overt, blatant racists out there, but this whole concept of white privilege, a lot of white people don't even realize they're doing it. It's kind of in that same vein, right? When you get that little shift in the power dynamic where you're in a position where your race is actually helping you in some way, it's super easy to, exploit that, take advantage of that, or, not even knowingly, use that in some way. And oftentimes that might be, or probably is, what a lot of white people do. Maybe not intentionally, some sure are, but maybe not intentionally. So again, just a window into what it could be like on that side of it. When race is working in your favor, how convenient and how easy it can be to say like, oh yeah, all right, I'm gonna go with this. It's somewhat human nature. Probably not a great thing about human nature, certainly not in the racism case from a white perspective, but it is somewhat our nature to say, if I can, right, I'm going to look out for myself. I'm going to do what's going to help me. So again, I think just an interesting scenario where it's a relatively common occurrence today, this idea of like, hey, we're in a little bit of a different time. How do I handle race, right? From a white person perspective, I've never had to think about this before. Well, hey, welcome to the party, right? That's, I think, what some black people would say. It's no fun, is it? And then the flip side, for black people who are saying like, hey, there's some advantageous things about this situation now in some ways, right? Certainly a lot of horrible things, but some things are more advantageous. And it's an opportunity to recognize like, hey, it's pretty easy to run with this and not even really think about it and just say, hey, I'm going to take it. I'm going to go with it. So a learning opportunity for sure. And again, my point overall in this video is seek out these things, right? Things that seem like interesting situations or situations that are getting people riled up or angry or just shifts or changes in how dynamics are playing out. Look at those and try and see if there's an opportunity to learn from them, because often there is. And then, as I said, the most critical thing is take that and bring it inward and say, hey, how am I acting in this way? Am I acting like that? Am I not even thinking about how race might be playing a role in my day-to-day behavior? And maybe this is a way to help me empathize. It's a way to help me put myself in those shoes and be more aware of it.